I got this urge to be intricate, kinda like a curse to burn till the day that I learn, but I don't adjourn till I interject. Some countries in distress, now tell me why be militant with immigrants, false imprisonment for the innocent. It just don't make much sense.
It's so ambivalent in this game of life.
I'm just another participant, yeah. Lately I've been thinking, I need to pass this message with the right rhymes. I've been living low-key, not like a life in the limelight. I wonder, is the time right? I'm focused on the moment. They still trying to drill these pipelines where sacred water's flowing, and I know that I cannot just let it go. It's a struggle every day, I'm going crazy. Really wish I wasn't troubled. If you're living in some ignorance, you need to pop that bubble. It's a puzzle, if we don't solve it, our country's gonna crumble on the double. Just listen please, I've got the time to stand and talk. I could tell a story about my arrest at Standing Rock. What really makes me mad is peaceful people shot by laughing cops just for occupying space to try to make construction stop. You see these corporations, all they care about is money. And is it funny? If you think it is, and you're a dummy. Think about your family, reality's a tragedy. I feel the need to change the world before it's a catastrophe. Now turn 21, but I still see the need to unify. Just understand that this life we live in is do or die. We need to realize that we survived the genocide. I cannot hide the fact that I'm grateful that I've been alive. Innocent people arrested just because of the money invested. It isn't equal in fact, even my freedom was being contested. We fight for the water is precious, gotta believe this moment is destined. Giving it back to all the oppressors, I think it's time that we teach them a lesson. My ammunition is lyrics written uniquely. You've got opinions, I understand this completely, but you need to listen. This truth I'm spitting will lift you into remission of the system we're living in, and it's easy. Why should we listen? They're not respecting the treaties. These people are evil, they pulled me out the need be. They call it business, it's sacrilegious. I've witnessed the sickness and it's ridiculous. My forgiveness is freaky.
And we will never free ourselves as human people. We will never free ourselves as sexual people. We will never free ourselves until we address the issue of how we live in balance with the earth. Because all of our resistance and all of our struggle is hollow, it's false, it's another one of those oppressors' hypocrisies. If we do not look out for the welfare of the earth first, because I do not care who it is, any child that turns on their mother is living in a terrible, terrible confusion. The earth is our mother. We must take care of the earth. They pollute. This oppressor, this machine that has gone mad and run amok, it is berserk.
Yes, it is berserk, that's why we hit them where it hurts. The only thing they seem to love is money, let's see if it works. Divest, arrest, and organize, I'll see you on the front lines. A multitude of strategies, the only thing that matters. These unimportant corporations, important poison and placing it in places where they think they can get away with raping Mother Earth. To tell you the truth, it still hurts. Go beyond woke, time to prove your worth, let your spirit work.
Why should we listen? They're not respecting the treaties. These people are evil, they pulled me out the need be. They call it business, it's sacrilegious. I've witnessed the sickness and it's ridiculous. My forgiveness is freaky. Why should we listen? They're not respecting the treaties. These people are evil, they pulled me out the need be. Why should we listen? They're not respecting the treaties. These people are evil, they pulled me out the need be.
Reality is the earth can no longer take this attack. We can no longer allow this thing to continue where it's polluting the air. It's polluting the water, it's polluting our food. They pollute the air, they pollute the water, they pollute our food, they pollute our minds. They put us out of balance. They have made us be insecure with ourselves.
My name is Trenton, Casillas-Bakeberg. I'm back up East Ontario, Western, up at Sioux below. I'm from Cheyenne, Butte, South Dakota, from the Cheyenne Sioux Reservation. Currently working as a supply runner with the work upon him, and so he's preoccupied, and I just wanted to share on his behalf that he wishes you all the best, this fight for water rights and this fight for the planet, and just really honored to be asked to be a part of this, on the show. So a little bit about myself. I started making music after high school. It started with just a passion for watching people do rap ciphers and stuff. And I never thought that I could fuse it with my passion for the earth and the environment, because you don't really hear that in mainstream music and in mainstream rap. Not a lot of people are conscious of the fact that that there is a crisis right now in the climate, and especially a lot of the people who have all the exposure and all the fame. They don't recognize that they have a lot of influence. And when you have that platform, I think it's important to use it to spread a positive message. But unfortunately, a lot of the famous people are, they're not concerned with the planet. They're not concerned with the climate or the water. And, that could be for many reasons. Because water has a spirit, earth has a spirit, like we all do. Maybe a lot of these people just aren't connected with their own spirit. So we pray for them. I guess I started making music about like life and the environment after Standing Rock and what happened to me there. My experience there was all beautiful. It was a powerful experience. And the day that I got arrested was a pretty ugly day. But I wrote a rap, and that's what you heard in the beginning of the video, was me channeling that experience and that trauma through the rap. Alright, because it was a really traumatic day. So in the story of what happened to me, I was arrested on October 27th of 2016, and I was at the treaty camp just north of the Ocheta-Shakoni camp, Standing Rock. And what had happened is that the police and the National Guard had surrounded that camp, and they were getting ready to raid it because it was directly in the path of the pipeline. So now I think it's that for them to open their minds and their hearts to the fact that there's another way. And during that prayer, while we were in the sweat lodge ceremony, they decided to tear down the NEP and arrest me out of there. And that itself was a really traumatic experience, just in a spiritual way. And I carry that. So I've lived with it for a long time. And what's really helped me is that when I put it into words, and I express it, and I'm able to tell that story in an artistic way, I find it very therapeutic. But yeah, that's kind of my story with music and how I've developed the passion for using spoken word and rap to share a message in a conscious way, and in a way that spreads the truth. And I know that my brother Prolific the rapper, he's all about the same thing. I don't know if you ever heard his song called Black Snakes that he did with a Tribe Called Red. He used their song, and it was really powerful. It came out during the time of No Dapple, and it accumulated a lot of views, and that's how I became aware of that style.
I don't think that they can't hear me, but you can hear me. Do you want to expand a little bit about what is the Black Snake and what is No Dapple for people who don't understand what happened at Standing Rock?
Sure.
Standing Rock is?
Yeah. So Standing Rock is the reservation that's just north of where I live. I live in Cheyenne River, and Standing Rock is kind of like our sister, right? Like they're connected, but they're separate in a way. And so what happened at Standing Rock was there was a company called Energy Transfer Partners, and they wanted to build an oil pipeline back in 2016. And they had proposed this plan to the North Dakota government, and they're all for it. The only thing is that it was routed north of Bismarck, and the residents of Bismarck said, no, we don't want this pipeline north of our water supply, because what if it spills? So we started to question that, because the residents of Bismarck who were like, 90% Caucasian, they all said no, then they moved the pipeline route south, which is just north of Standing Rock. And in that way, instead of endangering the residents of Bismarck, North Dakota, it was mainly endangering the residents of Standing Rock, the Indian reservation. And as much as we told them, no, we don't want it either, they, proceeded construction anyways. And the construction of the oil pipeline is what we call the Black Snake. And it's kind of like a metaphor, because the Black Snake is a prophecy in a sense. It's an evil spirit that comes and it kills everything that it touches, and that's what they built. I mean, it's done. Like, it's in the ground. It's flowing oil right now. We fought as hard as we could to stop it. But
so all you wanted was to protect the water of the Missouri River, and the Missouri River, right? Correct?
Yep.
Yeah,
yep.
And that's connected to how many reserves, and that water is the water that all those communities are hooked up to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not just Standing Rock. I mean, the Missouri is where we get our water too, here in Cheyenne River, and all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. Every single, not even reservations, people who live along the Missouri River and the Mississippi too. The Dakota Access crosses the Mississippi, but it also, they connect and they go all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. And if that were to leak into the water, it would probably be one of the largest environmental disasters in the United States history. Like, it would be irreversible. Everyone who gets water from the Missouri River there would be no way out. Like, we're pretty much done. So that's the scary part. It's kind of like a nightmare in a sense, because I had a dream about it one time. And maybe I should write a song, but I had a dream that we went to, get water out of the sink and it came out black.
Mm-hmm.
That's terrifying to think about. And it's possible that could become a reality in the future if it ever bursts. So I think it's important to raise awareness and make sure that people know that that's what's happening.
Thank you so much for all of your hard work that you have put in all the months that you were at Standing Rock, because I know it was really hard staying there. And especially in the winter months, like even to shower, to brush your teeth. And how many months did Standing Rock go for? I know I was there in the summer and it went all the way until the end of winter.
Yeah, so it started, they started the Sacred Stone Camp on April 5th, I believe, of 2016. Mm-hmm. And that was a couple of my friends and a few others from Standing Rock, people who were involved with the One Mind Youth Movement. And that's when they set up the Sacred Stone Campus in the very beginning of April of 2016. And the last day of the camps was on February 23rd of 2017.
Wow. So that's a long time that like all of those supporters and people came out from all over the world. And here from Six Nations, from New Zealand to Hawaii, all came out to support, because I think it's not only about like just Standing Rock, it was like signifying like all of our waters, and I think that Standing Rock was definitely like one of the protests that like shifted and became a movement globally for us to focus on our water health. And like, thank you for all of your time that you spent there. And I know that it's really hard just to live on a reservation that already has problems with access to clean drinking water. And I know that there's a lot of houses on Cheyenne River Reservation, on a lot of the reservations in South Dakota that don't have access to clean drinking water as it is. And just to pollute the one source that like everybody gets their water from and not everybody, and it shouldn't even be just the natives that are fighting it, it's everybody's water. And just thank you for all of your work that you did there.
Thank you.
What did you say? Oh, yeah. She said, my mother said, you wanted to. Well, thank you for all of your work, and I know that it's really hard that you were put in where your story is really hard for people to conceptualize what has happened and what did happen there. To a lot of water protectors, I know that there were dogs biting pregnant women and children that were there, and just all the traumatization that happened to everybody that was there. I think that people need to realize that if we shouldn't have to go through all of these things to have clean drinking water. And it's definitely really hard for viewers to understand what you're actually talking about, and like the gravity of what you're saying. I just wanted to bring attention to that because I know it's really hard. So you try to write stories into your songs about how you about your experiences. And do you want to tell us a little bit about how you write your songs?
Sure. So my creative writing process is pretty straightforward. Sometimes, when we're going through life, we experience things that make us feel strong emotions. And sometimes, we forget about them, but there's, down the line, there's things that make them come back, to the front of our minds again. For example, a breakup, right? So it doesn't always have to be about, the immensely urgent climate crisis, like something as simple as a breakup. I've made quite a few songs that aren't out yet, but I'm getting ready to release them, and they follow the story of me being a young man. And at times, whenever the emotions arise from the emotional residue that follows the breakup, I sit down and I write my emotions. Sometimes it doesn't even have to rhyme, but yeah, that's how you do it. You just kind of it's like writing a poem, but I just kind of sit down, and sometimes I'll play a beat if I want to like have it match a beat, and I just sit down and try to just get all my feelings on paper, because that's the therapy of it, is to take it from being in here and in your heart, and you put it down on something outside of you. That's one way of getting it out, so you're not carrying that heaviness. And thankfully, I want to give another shout out to Prolific, because he helped me set up my own studio. It's right here next to me. It's like a computer that he helped me get in my microphone. I took my closet, and it's not a closet anymore. I took all the rack out of it. There's no hangers or anything. I put soundproof paneling, so that's like my recording booth now.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, so I take my poetry, my spoken word, my raps, and then I'm also able to record them. And he helped me learn how to use the recording software, the editing software. And so he played a really big part in my growth as an artist. So I just want to say much love, brother. I wish you could be here, but I'm just so glad that you're a part of our lives, and that we're here to share this message together. Because that's what I do. I write my emotions, get them outside of my body, my spirit, put it on paper, and record it.
It's so awesome that that's where you are right now, and you have peers to help you with your songwriting, like Sean, Prolific. And because I remember just us cruising around, and you're just rapping, and you have some pretty good bars. And
going through Dairy Queen drive-thru?
Yeah, going through Dairy Queen drive-thru, and that's the only restaurant within 3 hours radius. So it's really amazing to see where you are, and I think that you're such an inspiration to other youth and who want to be like you, because I know that life is not easy growing up on Cheyenne River Reservation in South Dakota, and it's really hard. And I remember you a long time ago, how I first met you. How I first met you was you were dating somebody that I knew. So, and we were very young, so I know that we had similar experiences, and growing up in an environment and in a reservation that doesn't give you a lot of opportunities, and there's hardly anything there. And I'm so happy that you are coming from that, and I bet you are such a role model for all of these other youth that are there, growing up in the same environment and becoming and believing in yourself. And do you have any words of wisdom or any last message that you want to tell to any youth who are going through, who are like you?
Yeah, I think that it is hard where we come from, especially having role models, because a lot of our people are afflicted with various different problems, like especially with addiction to alcohol and drugs. That's the main thing on the reservation, not just here, but it's everywhere. You know, and me personally, I'm also in recovery because I went through the whole thing with alcohol and, you know, getting out of high school, and that's like the norm. You know, once you make it out of high school, a lot of people don't know what to do. It's like you either go off and you go to college or you're stuck here. Mm-hmm. So, unfortunately, I kind of fell into that cycle myself because I didn't leave to go to college. I started working jobs. You know, I started just trying to make money instead of searching for my purpose. But in that struggle is kind of where I found myself as well. And so I think that my message to the youth would be to embrace your struggle. Try to find the beauty in it, because that beauty is yourself. You know, there's that saying, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But yeah, it's really, it comes from within you. And that I know where we live, sometimes it's hard to see the beautiful things, but what I like about where we live is that, you know, don't get me wrong, being in the city is cool, but it's not possible when you're in the city to just walk, you know, 2 miles in one direction and you're in an open field. Boom. You know, the prairie is beautiful. And so I think it's important that we embrace where we come from instead of to shy away from it, you know, and not just the location itself, but the history behind it. And that, you know, we come from a place of understanding of what happened to our elders and our ancestors that came before them. You know, that way we can learn from them, learn and hear the stories. You know, the true history of how we ended up here on this reservation. Mm-hmm. And, you know, what happened between our ancestors and the European settlers. And just coming from where I come from, because I'm also half white. You know, they say Ieska. Because I'm mixed. I'm the mud blood. No, I was kidding. But, yeah, it's important. And I want to be able to share these opportunities that I've had with the youth around here. Because I've had several, you know, young artists, like just out of high school, like they're messaging me and they want me to help them record their music, and I'm all for it. But the thing is, like, it's in my home, and now with COVID-19 going on, it's like I don't want to just be inviting anybody into my home, especially, you know, because, you know, our cases have like gradually went up, you know, over the past month and I don't know, I'd say about a month and a half, our cases have really spiked here on Cheyenne River, and it's just dangerous because, you know, my mom, she's diabetic and she has other health problems. I just don't want to put her at risk. Mm-hmm. As much as I'd love to help, you know, these younger artists come out and record music, I think it would be better to like establish a recording studio outside of my home. That way, you know, I can implement like maybe social distancing and, you know, just have like a whole separate space for people to come in and then clean themselves, or, you know, just to have a space that's separate from my home. So I'm trying to figure out an idea, trying to figure out and develop a rational plan on how I can make that happen. And, you know, open up a creative space during, you know, this COVID-19 pandemic. So, you know, people are able to express their feelings, you know, in a therapeutic and healthy way, like I've learned how to do.
Yeah. Hopefully, it's really hard during these times, especially when we're in a global pandemic. It's crazy. Right now we had an outbreak here in 6 Nations, and it's really hard to do different things, even just like this show today. It puts like a wrench in your plans, really, but we can just do what we can with the guidelines that we have, like wearing a mask or washing your hands and social distancing. And so, yeah, it's definitely hard to do that. But thank you, Trenton. And I think that you'll have that grandmother Renee, who's our next speaker, is going to help us, I think,
Kasha,
in the way that we're feeling, I think.
Kasha, do you mind if we check your audio levels quick? I'm just going to play a video.
Oh, no, can you hear me?
Yep.
So you need to speak up like this.
We have a great video. It's called We're Not Drowning, We're Fighting. So I'll play that for our audience while we check your audio levels.
Great.
Thank you.
Sea level rise and unusually big waves are threatening not drowning, we are fighting. I am from Palau.
We are not drowning, we are fighting. I am from Vanuatu.
We're not drowning, we are fighting. We are from the martial islands.
We are not drowning. We are fighting.
We are not drowning. We are fighting for our cultures, our islands, our homes.
Right now? Okay. Thank you for the video. Now we have grandmother Renee, who has been a speaker, and her and Trenton actually met. And she gave really powerful words of encouragement to the youth after Standing Rock, and they were really, I don't know what the word is, but hurting after Standing Rock because of all of the trauma that they experienced there, and they really didn't have an elder who had any kind of encouraging words for them after that, and that was really needed. And so we're so happy that grandmother Renee offered her encouraging words and her hugs to our youth after Standing Rock. And do you remember that, grandmother Renee?
Yes, I do. And I'm very, thank you, Makasa, to all the young people, to all of you that are there holding up. And I was listening to your water at that time, and your water speaks, our water speaks to each other before we use our voices. And it was also the grandmothers speaking, your grandmothers, the ancestors. They said, acknowledge them, our children, acknowledge them. And so I use my voice, I use my physical presence so that they would hear these words. And these words were not mine. These were the words of your ancestors, because they saw and know what you have gone through, and nothing went from their view of appreciation. And so when I heard you speak, my water was speaking to your water, and what we came to be is that relationship, and that hug was that communication between the two worlds. And so I want to I'm very grateful that I was a stand-in grandma, to be there physically, to hold you, and I could have, because every one one of your foreheads, but you're all taller than me.
Do you have any teachings that you want to share with us about water?
Oh, yes. And first of all, I'd like to acknowledge all those that come before us, our ancestors, because they're still speaking to us. And I like how Trent uses his music, because that is another voice of the land. And our people understood that everything had life, but the first giver of life is the water. And the water is the holder of wellness. It has, as they say in today's language, many properties. But to us, we knew that it had life force. And so, through all our history, through all our stories, creation story tells how that symbol of that water, when we're grieving, look at what happened to her when she fell from skyward. She was without. And so it is to remind us, when we're all without, remind us how to take care of ourselves, to use that water. Can you imagine what it was to be like without a family, without loved ones, without a home, without a roof over her head? And so the water was there, and who helped her was the animals that came. And so water was the symbol of our birthing, the birth that we became earth people. With that creation story, the water has been mentioned in many ways that people have forgotten. We once knew that water was very sacred. So I like to acknowledge all the people, the elders, that have shared their story of water, because that's how we speak. Our water flows from us. And one of the elders said, whenever you get nervous, drink that water. And when you drink that water, all the messages and all the words will come back, and it will flow from you. And it will be like a waterfall that will bring refreshment, renewal, and restoring of their life. You see, that's the message of the water. And that's why when we had children, that's what I would imagine she did in creation story, because these are our teachings that was passed down. So when she had her first baby, that first child, I know she would have dipped it into water, because that's how our people did, to show that relationship, to dip that child in and say, this is who you belong to. And in her, it goes back to the woman. This is where the child is protected, in the womb. And when I was in Hawaii, this is how I was greeted when we went and did ceremonies up there. They took me to the water, and they give me the time to connect. I went under the water, and so she introduced me to the water, because the water was to be the one that I was to acknowledge, because I came to their land. And so the water, it talks about releasing. It carries that message that we all know intuitively. Whenever you're troubled, do you not take a shower to get away all those heaviness in your mind? And it's amazing how water is it teaches us so much. It's a powerful teacher. And it teaches us about taking care of ourselves, renewing our bodies. And so at that time, she taught her daughter all about that relationship with water. She taught her all these things, and this is why we still follow those traditions about passage right, about parenting, about how to and what to do. And so none of it is forgotten. All of us have that inside us. And whenever we use our tears, those tears will help us. Because this is what my grandma said. Remember, when you're crying, it releases, what do they call it today? Detoxifying. All the pollutants that's in your body. All these people were very smart for not having education, grade, university level. They knew the ins and outs, how water has power. They knew that speaking to the water, it has healing powers. And people have forgotten that. I have seen many miracles that has been just done by moon water, the moon ceremony, the waters that they call them sacred waters. To us, it is the water. And so the other thing of it was to put out fires. And there's that balance, the moon and the sun. And so when I hear how Grandma says it puts out fires, and I asked her what are the fires, she said, it is your anger. It is your anger. Because when you have anger in yourself, your water starts to boil. And it causes a disruption in your upset in your stomach. And so this is what we use for discipline today. The mothers would throw water on our fires to cool us down. The mothers would also, when we had fevers, was to use it to cool our bodies down, to bring our temperature down. We knew these things. We knew what medicines to use. We asked permission from the water. We asked the water to enhance this medicine. It was to work together and to help my child. And even in birthing, we talk to our water. We tell that water that we're excited to see this baby. And so this is why your water breaks. Because you give that water permission to let the child come. But today a lot of don't understand. And so when they're afraid, so that water, it takes a longer labor. And so we need to talk to the waters again. You see, the water reminds us of our original instruction. The water is gentle, but the water is strong. And so we use that metaphor of water in a stream. How a rock will have ridges, but after time, with that constant gentleness, that water will be smoothed. That rock will be smooth. And so that is like a child. And so you take that water and you wash that child like this. And so that child feels all that love and kindness in them. And this is why one of the first, what you do when the baby is born, you do that with that water. And you bless that baby and you thank that water to make your baby strong. We also bathe them in cold water because it was to build up resilience, so that it was a prevention from sickness and disease. Today, our babies, or even our adults, they have to take hot showers. They are weakening their immune system. We need to get back to cold water again. And so these waters we're supposed to be drinking room temperature waters. There's only a certain time of the year that we drink cold water. Because the food we eat today will cause a lot of, when we drink cold, we usually have greasy foods today. And what they're going to do is cause a lot of health problems in the body. People a long time ago, the grandmas, when they had an upset stomach, they didn't go and buy medicine in the drugstore. They went and warmed up water, and they talked to that water. And they asked that water to remove that blockage. That's what it means, that on your intestines, remove that blockage so that the water can flow and move it. And so the water was very important for eliminating, meaning to get rid of, it had to break down our food. And that's so amazing because I remember our people would always, how we were taught was to drink warm tea. Is that amazing? Warm tea. To have it at nighttime so that you could go sleep. It would help your stomach to break down all those things. And so water, we always knew it was sacred. And so we use them in ceremonies, wiping up the tears. And the wampum shell is a symbol of water. It comes and it reminds us how to renew ourselves. And so we even hear the raindrops. Where did that come from? Creation was telling us a sound. What did it give us? A vibration. And what did it give us? It gave us our drums, our water drums, our hand drums, that beat. And so that vibration raised our waters up. It built up our immune system. And so these vibrations we understood, because they say when you are troubled, go to the waters. The water will be, as they say, will take away all your troubles. It will be as if the waters came and took all those things off of you. In some of the ceremonies, you have to go and stand in the water. And you visualize that the water has taken all those grief, all that chaos off your body. This is why our people would dive into the water. This is why they would stand in the water, so that it would release. And so the wampum shell was always known as it was sacred and was healing. And this is why we have those beads to hold, to release. And those beads were a symbol of renewing our spirit, because the water would always cleanse it. This goes back to the vibration, and I was glad he sings, because we were taught by nature that water sings to us. And so when we sing, the water, the energy flows into all creation. This is why we use our seed songs. We use them in ceremonies. We need to sing these songs because it raises up our water, our vibration, and makes it bubbly, builds up our immune system so that we can feel we can achieve anything. So these are things that we need to do, is go to the waters and speak to the waters. You see the reason the rivers are polluted? Because there's unhealthy language. People are swearing. And this is what the old people would always say, do not swear, because it will trouble your waters. What do you get? You get ulcers. You get all these health problems because you disrupt your water. Negative things on your mind, that will disrupt your water. And so, water has always been a powerful teacher. And that's why the old people would always say, when you're near water, just be careful, because water can pick up. And so when I stand next to someone, I'm already receiving. And that's where the healers come. You are a healer. Each one of us are healers. And our water speaks to each other, and our water speaks to the plants, to the trees, to everything, because we are of the same. We need that water transfer and transition. And so the water will tell us. And so for all those that are troubled, I worked at a treatment center for many, many years. And that's why I got the name Grandma, because I preferred to be there in the evening and on weekends. So whenever they were troubled, they would say Grandma. And so I would sing to them, or I'd tell them a story, I would hum to them. Or I just hold them and I rocked them. These were adults. Again, I was taking care of that water, nurturing that water. And so they asked if they could call me Grandma. And I said, I'd be honored. And so this is why they named me. They named me, and I carry it because of they asked me. And so I do that for them. But it also talks about, there's so many things that water can talk about. I can go on for hours, but I know I just have short. And the water also talks about the birthing. And even how our body's made, the water breaks and come. And that's just like in creation story. She came through that hole in the water and she fell and she came here. And so, but it also tells us that transition when we return back to Skyworld. You see, these are our pumps, our lungs. And that's what the Creator, when we came from the sky world, when he made these lungs, they are to work. And we will know, they say, when we take in too much grief, because because we will have much problems in this area. And so in order to break up our grief, a lot of the old people would do this. Just pat them. And what do they do to babies? They burp them to bring up the gas. And so we need to do this to break up that grief, and especially over our heart breaking. And so when you've done that, now you rub your hands together. And this is how my grandma taught me. Whenever I was troubled, she would come and put her hand over my heart. And she said, breathe. It was like she was pulling out all the grief of what I had experienced. Breathe. And I could just feel every time she did that, it was like she pulled out that the water was warm because her hand was warm. And it spoke of love. And so when I felt that, my water was taking and healing that grief in my heart. And so breathing was very powerful part of drawing the water, the grieving. Because when we're grieving, what do? We hold our breath. We have another grief. We have another grief. And so after a while, our chest becomes very heavy. It's like we have flu or a cold. In this pandemic, it's a gift. Because it's to teach us to use our lungs again. To use our lungs and to breathe and to take care of our grief. To work on our grief. And each one of you, you don't have to have lots of money. All you have to do is put that fire into your hands. Use that water, that medicine. Each one of you have medicine. And put it over your heart. And take that deep breath to bring up that fire. And it breaks that heaviness. And so when you take there and release your hand, it's just like it's going to go away. So these are things that we have been learning all about water. But a lot of people have forgotten, because that's why Grandmother Moon is here. She realized how much grief will affect our people. And so she realized to her twin grandsons, she realized that she had carried grief and she wanted to make things right. She wanted to make things right for her children's children. And so she said, I want to watch over my grandchildren and make sure that they're okay. And this is why we have moon ceremonies. Because 3 days, Grandma's like this. Before any changing of the moon, she goes like this. She wants you to get rid of all that sadness that you have. And 3 days after, get ready. Let some more come out. 3 days, it's just going to be like this. The constant. And that's the love of Grandma. Unconditional love. And that's why we always look up to Grandmother Moon. Because we have never been abandoned. We never have been, as they say, neglected. We always have someone looking after us, especially when we're grieving. We were also reminded, salt water. Put salt in your water. Put salt in your water. Because we understood that was protection. What do you do when you get a sore throat? Salt in the water. Kill that bug, kill that virus. And that is one of the easiest tools that anybody can use to restore their wellness and their well-being. So, 7 thickness of our skin. And so on.
We can definitely, I can definitely relate to what you're talking about when you're talking about fasting and how we are so grateful for, how we learn to be so grateful during that time for water and for food, but mainly how grateful we are for water. And I think that's what helped me when I was growing up, and how I didn't really become passionate about water or saving our water here in 6 Nations or anything like that. It kind of just started out from when I was fasting, and I I've been a sun dancer since I was around like 13, 12 years old. So I started out as 2 days, and then the next year I went to 4 days. So since then I've been fasting without food or water every single year, and for 4 days. And that's, when I was young, that's what I always prayed about, was that that our water continues to be clean, and that our environment continues to be healthy for the next 7 generations. And during that 4 days, like, you have a lot to pray about, but it's always been about land. And I think that's another thing that a lot of people don't really understand when they're talking to indigenous people about, like, the water, and is that it's not just a passion, and it's more of like a way of life, and that we have been doing this for a very long time, and it's more of like a way of life than it is a passion or anything. So I definitely understand, like, what you're talking about, going through fasting or the rites of passage. That also has to do with fasting. But when you go without food or water for 4 days, you understand how precious it is, and how your body reacts to not having water for 1 day, not having water for a second day or a third day. And each day you can tell what body, what is shutting down, and what, like, you're struggling with, and how precious it is. And since, like, that's why it's so important, the work that everybody, even on the panel, is doing, that Trenton did, that is protecting the water, because there's only less than 2% of fresh water in the world. And it's crazy to think that, because I know personally, like, what it's like not to go without water, and to think that we only have that much water in the world just brings the attention of how much we need to protect it. And yeah, thank you. Do you have any suggestions for Trenton about ways to cope with the stressful work that he does, or any of the water protectors after they're exhausted?
I would use earth, soil. It's just like, you always see a dog when they're having pests on them. Well, I would think of them as trauma, where they roll around in the dust, roll around in the dirt. And so it's just like, even how people pay for mud bath is to look at how you laugh and everything after being in the mud and rolling around, how good and youthful you feel after mud. But when I am dealing with grief, you can go to the dollar store and buy a bag if it's in the winter time, and what I do is I have that fresh bag of soil, and I go like this, and I put my hands in it, and I just kind of, it's just like, it detoxifies all that grief that I have carried. And that's what nature has shown us. All the birds, this is what they do, is to help them to, they get right into that, and you see the birds will be in the dirt and everything, they cut around, and the dogs will roll over in the dirt, and even in the grass, and that's what I used when I was in, when there was different ones that had gone through severe trauma. I would say, come on, let's go outside. And I said, I want you to lay on the ground. And I just want you to look up in the sky and watch the clouds. And I want you to just kind of roll over a couple of times. I just want you to turn and face into the earth and deep breathe, deep breathe. And it's like everything was going to be drawn out of, everything was being drawn out of them, bringing them back to balance. bringing them back and restoring them. And so, if they're not able to be, if they're in the city or anything, this is what I recommend. Just buy a bag of soil and just feel it, smell it. Because remember when you were little, how much you were free from a lot of trauma, anytime you had gone through trauma and when you were a child, when you played in dirt and it restored you. So, what I do is...
Thank you. Thank you so much, Grandmother Renee, for all of your teachings. I learned a lot from you. In all of my classes I had you in, and also just right here and now, I didn't hear some of the stories that you were talking about, and it's really refreshing and brings you back to our teachings. And yes, Yahweh, so much for your words. We have Kelsey Leonard, Dr. Kelsey Leonard, on with us too, and she is a water scientist and a water scientist and protector. Dr. Kelsey Leonard seeks to establish indigenous traditions of water conservation as a foundation for international water policy making. She is the first indigenous woman to earn a science degree from University of Oxford, and she is also a Harvard graduate. Congrats. Chelsea, thank you so much for being here. Currently, Dr. Leonard is an assistant professor in the Faculty of Environment at the University of Waterloo. She represents the Shinnecock Indian Reservation on the Mid-Atlantic Committee on the Ocean, which is charged with protecting America's ocean ecosystems and coastlines. She also serves as a member of the Great Lakes Water Quality Board of the International Joint Commission. Dr. Leonard has been instrumental in safeguarding the interests of Indigenous nations for environmental planning and builds Indigenous science and knowledge into solutions for water governance and sustainable oceans. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Kelsey.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here, and thanks to everyone that's tuning in via YouTube for today's session.
No problem.
I know I have a few slides as we get into our conversation. Would you like me to start sharing my screen?
Yeah.
Alright, that should be loaded for everyone now.
Great. Do you want to share your background on why you pursued water research? Yeah.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, you can start with your presentation on water justice.
Sure. Well, thank you so much to everyone for having me, and to Makasa and the whole team for this wonderful podcast or vlog or what we might be calling it now. I think this is a really unique opportunity for us to have, cross-border international conversations. I think that that's very much indicative of water and being like water, and water doesn't see boundaries, so it's really great that we have so many different Indigenous people represented on your show, and just really honored to be a part of it. So I'll say hello to everyone. My name is Dr. Kelsey Leonard. I am from the Shinnecock Nation. Some of you may have seen a TED Talk out there in the world that I've put out. I'm going to mention a few things from that TED Talk, but if you are interested in learning more, I think the team will make a link available to that. It's also streaming on YouTube, so it's why lakes and rivers should have the same rights as humans, sort of the idea behind the talk. So definitely encourage you to watch that if you enjoy some of what I'll be sharing with you today. So, as I mentioned, I'm from the Shinnecock Nation. Our territory is located on what we call Promenade, but what's currently known as Long Island, New York. The area here that you can see on the screen that's in purple is our current territory on Long Island. We are situated, our reserve or our reservation is situated on a peninsula. So we're bordered on three sides by water, that of Shinnecock Bay, so an estuary brackish system of where fresh water meets salt water. And then just on the other side of a barrier island is the Atlantic Ocean. So we are a coastal Algonquin community. Our traditional territory of eastern Long Island, Paumanok, sort of the whole area would have been purple at one point prior to European colonization. We've been here, for our creation stories since time immemorial. But definitely science is working, with our own indigenous science in terms of Western science dating, our occupation of this land and part of Turtle Island for at least 10,000 years. We say longer, but Western science still has to catch up to that. So why I share that with you is because we just have this really rich and deep history of being water people. And I love grandmother Renee's comments earlier about how we foster connection to water with our young ones and through the birthing process and understanding water as that first medicine because it nurtures us in the womb. And I related so much that because even my own story, I think, as Makasa was asking earlier, how did I get into water or wanted to be a water scientist? It comes from being a water person. Shinnecock in our language means people on the stony shore. So inherent to my political identity, but also my cultural and spiritual identity as a human being on this planet is about that shore and protecting that shore. And when grandmother Renee mentioned about bathing our babies in water when they first come into the world, that was also my experience, both the experience of how we all are coming to this planet as being mammals and that process. But then actually having my family, I was born in Hawaii, so I was actually bathed in the Pacific Ocean first, and then when we came back, military family, when we came back, I actually was only in Hawaii, and my dad was at the end of his tour, so probably maybe that was about, once when I was born, it was about the Pacific Ocean, I was bathed there, and then maybe about 6 months to a year after I had the opportunity as a baby to come back to the Atlantic and be bathed in that. So I definitely see myself, again, getting to your initial question, Makasa, as a water baby, both, spiritually and politically. So that really shapes a bit of what I'm sharing with you folks today. Is for those that haven't maybe been to Long Island, aren't really familiar with that part of Turtle Island, we call it Paumanok, which sort of loosely translates to Fish Island or Whale Island, and this is a satellite image where you can actually see that the outline of the island is in that of a fish. And I've got kind of another fun gift that will overlay it so that you can kind of see the outline of fish bones. And even before there was satellite imagery, this is what we call the island. So, in our indigenous science, in our understanding of our communities and our territory, we knew that this was a special place and we knew how to call it, even not having the sort of satellite imagery that we have today. So I think that's just another way of showing how indigenous science is so important in how we understand water protection and water justice. So we've had this really long history of being on Long Island, being water protected, being coastal people, but yet we're facing some really stark challenges. And I think that it's important to raise awareness for your viewers that are listening in tonight that right now on Long Island we have major issues around nitrogen that is leading to our rivers dying off, beaches being closed, people not being able to bathe in the water because of contaminants and pollution. It's leading also to our non-human relations being severely impacted by, what's largely seen as human-driven contamination. So when we think about nitrogen bombs, what we're calling them, that leads to massive fish die-off on Long Island, a lot of that nitrogen, although it's what we call kind of non-point source pollution, which means we're not really able to identify where it comes from. We, do have some emerging studies that are showing that it's really linked to a lot of the ways in which we manage and govern water on Long Island, particularly wastewater. And some of you and some of the viewers might be familiar with our Indigenous Nation territories. A lot of us rely on groundwater wells and septic tanks. So these sort of underground concrete chambers that our wastewater goes into that then someone comes in a truck to, pump it out and deliver it somewhere else for larger treatment. But if those sort of septic tanks are infiltrated because of climate change due to storm surge or saltwater, which leads to saltwater intrusion in freshwater systems, but then sort of storm surge that can overflow a septic tank, it can leak and leach into freshwater systems. And that's what we're seeing right now. So when we think about the eastern end of Long Island, we have as many septic tanks on just one half of the island as the whole state of New Jersey. And what that means is about 70% of our population, non-Indigenous and Indigenous, rely on septic tanks for wastewater storage. And that's really, really problematic, and it leads to us as an Indigenous community having to witness the messages that are coming from our non-human relations. So since 2016, NOAA, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration for the United States, the folks that monitor marine mammal activity, have declared an unusual mortality event for both right whales and humpback whales in our region of the United States. And as Shinnecock people, we have a really unique spiritual connection to the whale, both as a relation that we harvested and gave thanks for in that harvest, but also as a messenger. And for us as a community and as a nation, seeing these unusual mortality events, seeing these fish die-offs that are occurring, we're witnessing massive climatic changes in our community that are impacting our freshwater system. And so what do we do about that, right? Where do we see ourselves? Well, we really understand that we have to adapt to the climate changes that we're seeing in not only on Long Island but globally. Sea level rise is going to be a massive issue for freshwater systems, making sure that, again, if we're all reliant on groundwater wells, that the seas are going to rise and they then could infiltrate through saltwater intrusion into groundwater aquifers, then that depletes the amount of available freshwater resources that folks can draw on from their wells that are in the back of their homes. And so for us here, on Long Island, on the eastern shores of the United States and Canada, by 2050, we're expected to maybe have about 1.5 feet sea level rise. We may see by 2100 feet. That could happen sooner if we're not taking massive climate action today. And so what does that look like? Well, right now on your screen, you're seeing the Shinnecock Nation territory as it currently exists. And what you're seeing now is what will be underwater by 2050 if we don't take massive climate action. And what that also is showing you, so the dark red is definitely by 2050. The sort of more interior perimeter of the yellow is by 2100 or sooner if if the models are potentially wrong, and they could be. So if we continue to pollute, if we have the same level of carbon emissions that we can see globally, then that sea level rise could be massive. And so, for folks who are kind of tuning in, like, well, what does this mean? I don't really understand the graph. What that means is it kind of cuts our reservation in half. And the colonial settler states have put us all on reservations and reserves and aren't really providing a pathway for us to relocate or to acquire new land. And so that's kind of some of the challenges that I'm working to address from a policy level. And the reason I'm doing that is because it presents us with a lot of climate grief. I've just kind of dropped some proverbial bombs on us, right? That's what I feel as a Shinnecock person every day. It's like, okay, well, our whale relations are dying, our fish are dying, our waters are dying, the planet is not okay. Like, what do we do? And that, there's a lot of scientists out there that talk about climate grief and climate anxiety. It's very real. It's a real aspect of our mental health that we deal with every day. And, what I've sort of situated is to say, okay, well, I can wallow in the climate grief, or I can lean in to what are some of the innovations and best practices, not only for my own community, but around the world that are helping us to address these challenges. And so, we're doing, there's community members back home that are doing really great work through shoreline restoration, through really trying to mitigate wetland migration along our territory, reseeding of shellfish. And I lean into that work. I lean into the fact, as for the viewers that saw just before with the Climate 350 video or Pacific 350 video, that we're not drowning, we're fighting. And that's really where we are. We are not going to sit idly by and watch our shores disappear. So we're fighting by using what sort of Western scientists call nature-based solutions, but for us, it's traditional ecological knowledge. Practices that we have been doing for thousands of years, but because of colonization and Western science thinking that they know better, were often prohibited for decades, if not a century. And so now we're retaining those practices and really trying to lean into them and also share these solutions with other non-Indigenous folks. Another thing I wanted to raise for Long Island is population. We are facing massive issues around the growth of just our population density, the amount of homes and buildings that are being created for where we are, which is the eastern end of Long Island. And when you think about COVID-19, that's another massive issue for us in population growth, because we had this massive exodus of New York City folks, have some other names for them, but I'll call them New York City folks for now, who were, running, leaving the city because they didn't want that high density of the city to potentially keep them from contracting COVID-19 as New York became an epicenter of the world for the contraction of the disease. They then came out to the eastern end of Long Island to their vacation homes and made them their permanent homes, and that impacts the amount of available water. It also impacts wastewater, and for us, it impacts the way in which folks are desecrating our traditional territories, our burial grounds, and just our environment and our non-human relations that we really love and pride ourselves on. So I think, as I share this with you, just some other thoughts is, I think it's important for us to think through also what are things that we can do individually. And I know that a lot of the viewers are probably tuning in from Six Nations and from Ontario. It's currently known as Ontario, and I live here now as well. But, for my community, one of the things that I also noticed when we're talking about fresh water and pollution, one of the biggest contributors to water pollution globally is plastic. And of that, folks think plastic, plastic bags, plastic straws. The federal government for Canada just said we're going to ban single-use plastics by 2021. Awesome, let's keep that going. But what folks don't realize is a massive contributor to plastic debris are cigarettes. Now, we're big producers of cigarettes, we're big sellers of cigarettes as a Shinnecock Nation and then other tribal nations around around Turtle Island are. And I just think that, okay, if we are going to keep that arm of our economic development going, we need to do so in a sustainable and responsible way. And I think that means putting more research and development into addressing the plastic that we're using in the development of the cigarette, and then also disposal and outreach and education. So I started this campaign and was awarded a grant through Green Starter, Running Strong for American Indian Youth with Billy Mills. And it really is to just get people to be more aware, educated, take a pledge against plastic, so try not to use single-use plastic, and hopefully, if you can, dispose of your cigarette butts appropriately so they don't wind up in our water, not only as plastic pollution, but also the other toxic contaminants that exist within a cigarette then also infiltrate freshwater systems. Mm-hmm. So Yeah, I feel like I might pause there. I have some other things I wanted to share, but I also didn't want to totally monopolize the time. But maybe if we come back, maybe this is like a good pause point, and then I can come back and share some of like my pathways forward.
There's a question for you from our viewers. It says, what are some of the drawbacks of Western environmental laws and policies that you have noticed pertaining in the commitment of pertaining to the contamination of water near Long Island? What have they failed to address? Did I say it again, or are you?
No, I think that's a really great question. And it's a very long answer as well. I probably could go on for a few days about my issues with Western laws, and how they have, really set up a lot of the failures that we see in our environmental governance system. A few things. Firstly, which is sort of what my TED Talk goes on to discuss, that existing Western systems don't recognize legal personhood of water or non-human entities aside from corporations, which is really challenging when we think about how that conflicts with indigenous legal systems and indigenous legal ideas about how we treat water and non-human relations, recognizing that they have rights and that we have responsibilities to those rights and to ensuring that they have the ability to exist, flourish, and evolve on the planet in the same way that we do. So that would be one massive issue, and that's on Long Island as well. There's no legal person to grant that exists on Long Island currently. Hoping to change that. Another big issue with some of the laws, both on Long Island and New York State, is just the vestiges of colonialism. We have a lot of laws from the colony of New York that are still on the books that make it really difficult for our indigenous nations, tribal nations, to exercise their sovereignty. And so I think, really trying to address some of those issues, some of the SCOTUS decisions. Right now we have a SCOTUS hearing happening for Amy Coney Barrett, and we have no idea what her position is on federal Indian law, how she's going to potentially impact New York tribes, having maybe no background in federal Indian law. So the Western legal system is very problematic. And from a Long Island perspective as well, the foundation of U.S. property law is actually based out of a Long Island case, Pearson v. Post. And there's massive issues with with the whole foundation of U.S. property law. And I think that also speaks to the decay of environmental governance that exists in the United States, because it's founded on really a fallacious case.
Thank you. I think you answered that question very well. Renee, Grandmother Renee or Trenton, do you have any questions for Kelsey? Or comments or anything?
I am so grateful. And when I see you young people, it is very emotional that the blood memory is coming. And I would like to sit with both of you, and I know we could talk for hours about this passion we have. And so I'm so grateful, and know that I am always sending prayers for your continuation of carrying our words. And you are reminding me of our prophecy, that you are using that to bring down those, or to, I see you drawing that bow, that arrow, and that it will come and it will touch those people right here. Your words, your songs, and don't ever think you're not making progress. You are. And I want to say, and I send my love to you.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, yeah. Trenton, did you have any comments for Kelsey so far? Or Renee?
apologize, but thank you though. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, you can tell us more about the wampum shells, because I know that we use them a lot here in Six Nations. Oh, I know we're a lot of, yeah. I think everybody knows in Six Nations what wampum shells are, and that's what is on the screen, correct?
Yeah, so this is a great entree into sort of the next portion of what I wanted to share about, even maybe getting back to your original question of why is all of this work important? Well, for me, it's important because it speaks to, our political existence as Shinnecock, making sure that the water is taken care of, that the shore is taken care of. But I also think it speaks to our connection and kinship networks across our tribal nations, indigenous nations, because of something that I like to call, and other scholars have called, wampum diplomacy. So now living in kind of Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe territories, I see a lot about wampum and about treaty belts, but I often see so much disconnect about where the shells actually come from.
Yeah, exactly. I think that everybody needs to know where they come from, because they obviously do not come from the Grand River. So where do they come from?
I was hoping to go do some clam digging in the Grand River and find some, but unfortunately, no. So what you see as a wampum shell is actually called, from our eastern coastal waters, a quahog shell. Or depending on the native nation that you are, quahog, but so that's actually an Algonquian word. It comes from our language. In Western science, it's called a northern Murciana clamshell, or northern Murciana clam. It's sort of a hard shell clam is what they're known for in Western science. And that's the specific type, the quahog is the specific type of shell that you need to find that deep purple that you see in the belt. And so all of the different color variations in belts come from different shells. So the deep purple is from the shells that are from our waters. And so the pictures here, this is actually some of my family members, particularly my brother, who just harvested these last weekend. And so you actually have to go out into our coastal bay estuarian areas to clam dig, to harvest these out of the bay bottom. And the beautiful thing about wampum is that it needs freshwater and saltwater to grow. It grows in a brackish environment. So it really is that just sort of beautiful connection of showing us that water connects us all. Dig it up, you dig the shells, and the interesting thing too about quahogs or shellfish is they're filters. So they filter the water and they make it healthy, and they also ingest the toxins that might not be so great in the water. So when I'm working to protect freshwater and ocean estuarian systems, it's to make sure that I can protect wampum not only for my own community, but for all communities that also rely on it for our political existence. So you dig, you harvest in a bucket, you have to then lug that back to where you can go and clean them. Like most indigenous communities that are harvesters, we don't waste anything. So you harvest them, then you eat them, as you see in the bottom picture there. Butter is usually really great. And then you have to clean them. So then you can kind of see the top middle picture is my brother cleaning all the shells. And then your next picture that I have is sort of kind of the image of the shell. This is it cleaned. You guys may have seen that. So those are cleaned, and then the dark purple, or so the purple beads, and the white beads come from a whelk shell. So that's a different type of species that you also have to harvest from eastern Atlantic shores. And then those are carved into beads. That one bead can take at least 4 hours to make, and that's if you are a skilled wampum maker. So when we think about the treaty belts that govern, large portions of the Great Lakes, those belts are living entities. Because they actually are constituted from wampum shells that came from waters on the eastern shores, and they're connecting us to this vast trade network of diplomacy and political connection of not only indigenous peoples, but with non-indigenous peoples. And so when I do water advocacy or when I do ocean protection work, I'm working to protect that political diplomacy and mechanism and history that we've had for thousands of years, because what I see right now is a lot of our wampum beads and belts being manufactured from plastic. And that to me is so counterintuitive, so almost horrifically ironic, because we're seeing that plastic is one of the leading contributors to the contamination of our waters. And yet, if we actually invested much amount of time as we do into producing plastic wampum beads, that money could be going into environmental restoration of our shorelines so we can actually harvest real wampum. So, this is really important work, and it's important for our continued political existence, and so it's how I wound up kind of having policy hats with the U.S. National Ocean Council in the Mid-Atlantic region, and then also working in the Great Lakes, because many of the first transboundary water treaties in the Great Lakes are wampum belts. So it's all connected, and I hope that folks, especially viewers, can start to see the storied tradition of Indigenous diplomacy for water governance that exists throughout Turtle Island and existed prior to what's currently known as the United States and Canada. And for me, it's really been, trying to highlight our Indigenous science. We have ways to address climate change. We have ways to take care of, submerged cultural resources. We've dealt with sea level rise before because we know that we have fishing villages and fishing sites that are now submerged because during the Paleo period, we were out on the intercontinental shelf, hunting caribou and harvesting whales and fish at that line. So we've dealt with sea level rise before, and we can do it again. And so we're hoping that other folks will learn from our Indigenous science that we've built, through evidentiary practice over thousands of years, and be able to develop new solutions for our current climate crisis.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's an awesome point that you just said, because I think that's why it's important that we value Indigenous knowledge, Indigenous science, because we did it before and we can definitely do it again. So it's really I love what you just said and what you just shared, and how we should value Indigenous science. Because we did it before, so we have done this a long time. And before even Western science was called Western science, we had Indigenous knowledge that we have contributed and not contributed, but we have gained for thousands and thousands of years. And that's why I think it's more valuable since it's so old, personally. Do you have any more questions, Grandmother Renee, or any of our audience viewing? Please feel free to comment any kind of questions that you have for any of our guests, Trenton or Grandmother Renee or Kelsey. Yeah. You're on mute, Grandmother Renee. You're on mute. You have to unmute yourself, Renee. There you go.
There? Okay.
We can hear you.
I want to say thank you about filter, the wampum being a filter, and because of that, when I started making wampum beads, all you had to do was wear a mask so that the fumes. Now you have to be covered completely because it can harm your body, and it's a practice that it's getting to be dangerous to make wampums, and it's because they have given their lives to help us, and so I know we can do something about it. And I've been praying and thanking the wampum for also saving us and taking care of us. Thank you.
I think that's such a great point, Grandmother Renee, and thank you for bringing it up, because I think there are younger generations that want to carry on this tradition, and I don't want you to sort of go out and think it's as easy maybe as my slides make it look, in that, there is this, a health risk now because of them being filter feeders that in that carving process, I didn't go too much through the carving process, but you are releasing, particles from the shell that you then can inhale. And, maybe there's a lot of similarities with COVID-19 and the way in which we think about, airborne transmission of viruses. Wampum is sort of, it's trapping all of these sort of airborne contaminants or waterborne contaminants inside of its shell to filter that out so that we, can enjoy the bays and the waterways that it grows in. And so when you then go to harvest, carve it and harvest it, you have to be careful about, how you're carving and what type of protective PPE that you're wearing so that you're not inhaling those toxins. And the same thing is true with eating, right? I told you about you don't waste any part of the Mohawk, any part of the wampum making process. Everything is used. But if what they're filtering leads to toxic shellfish, which means you can't eat the meat because if you eat it, you can get something called toxic shellfish paralytic syndrome. So you can get paralyzed from eating toxic shellfish. So one thing to note is that as Indigenous peoples, Shinnecock folks, we know, and with scientists, we know how to monitor when there's like a toxic shellfish epidemic or it's usually affiliated with a bloom, which means that there's been some type of massive influx of pollution into a waterway that then creates a bloom of pollution that leads to there not being enough oxygen or too much nitrogen that the wampum can't filter out on its own, and then becomes toxic to each or to, like you mentioned, even later on, because it's like a tree. It's stored in its membranes that you can, if the wampum experiences 100 years of 70 different blooms, and you harvest it after 100 years, you could be, carving up that legacy of pollution. And that's something that a lot of folks don't realize about the process of wampum carving is clams are, there are some clams that are 500 years old and still in the ocean. And so when we think about wampum belts, like, they're almost like, I think that's why our people created them, because the wampum never dies. The shell never dies. Even when it's living in water to when it's carved, it's always alive.
Yeah, they're always a living tree. So the trees are alive physically and
scientifically.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of mind blowing of how brilliant that is, that they know that this will always be alive and living no matter how many generations down the road. Those trees will be alive. And a lot of what you were saying is the same here in Six Nations. Like, we also have with the water waste treatment, it's the same thing. We have like around 23 sewage pipes draining into the Grand River, coming down the river and coming directly to us, to Six Nations, because we're down the river. And we have many dams that stop the flow of the river, and that makes the river stagnant, and which then makes the water even more polluted because it's not cleaning itself out. It's stagnant. So all of that pollution and all of the sewage, and you're right about the storms. They don't tell you about like what happens when it storms and it overflows, and all of that raw sewage goes directly into the Grand River. Every single storm, and we have 23 of them along the Grand River. And like I have said before on the different shows, that I didn't believe that the Grand River was clean upstream at all. I thought when I went on a 2-row paddle, I started at the mouth of the river, and it was totally clean and completely clear. And I thought this like can't be the Grand River because I've seen the Grand River my whole life and it's always been dark and mud and you can't see the bottom at all and it's completely dirty. And when I seen it up there, it made me realize like that. It gave me the hope that we will one day maybe one day we'll be able to see the Grand River at the bottom here in Six Nations because we have, because it's clean upstream, then that means it can be clean downstream if we make changes. If changes do happen, and if it's able to change, then it's a possibility and it's possible that we can get our river clean again. And I think we just have to take care of our river, and that includes like somehow figuring out a way of how we can change the water waste treatment so it doesn't go into the Grand River, and also the dams and the decommissioning of dams. And there's different ways to do that. One is, for example, putting a different kind of blocking in front of the dam so it falls down over time and taking out the old dam. So it falls down over time and so all that sediment doesn't completely pollute the water, because that's why we can't go outside right now and blow up our dams, because all that sediment would contaminate our river and would make a lot of the life inside of the river sick and die, and there's a lot of animal life that comes off that river that relies on it. So we won't be able to go out and like blow it up right now, which a lot of people in Six Nations want to do. They're like, why can't we go and blow it up right now? Because it really is not doing anything for our river. It's more so just so that the water level is high, so that recreation can happen, and it's basically just a dump, and that like people can ride their boats and sea-doo on it. So that's the main reason that our dams are up, and they were bought with like Six Nations money. So it's totally possible that we are able to take it down, and it's just a matter of how and of people, of us doing it. So I hope that's in our future. Of taking the dams down.
Well, I hope so too, and I think that as Indigenous peoples and nations, we can learn a lot from other nations that have done similar work. And so I know in the Pacific Northwest right now, there's a big fight for dam decommissioning, along the Klamath River and different river systems out that way. And some of them have been really successful. And I think even in this part of the world, there have been some dam decommissionings in upstate New York and New England, and I think that those are areas that we can learn from, and because I want us to also be conscious that in the decommissioning process, we're not further contributing to the harming of those ecosystems, right? So there's a lot of technical and engineering aspects that have to come into play. Because they over-engineered them to begin with, they can make us play God, and now we're having to clean up that.
Exactly. Yeah, so we can learn from how other people in other nations decommission their dams, and that's what Nick Rio is going to be doing in our project, is sharing how they decommission dams.
That's wonderful, and I think for viewers, that's Professor Nicholas Rio out of Dartmouth College, and he's a fantastic oceanographic scholar as well, who works in the space of environmental governance, and I think any of his research would be really phenomenal to move this forward.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm excited to be able to move forward with decommissioning the dams, because I've seen how it is upstream, and I want that for us, and that's just one process and one way of how we're going to get there.
When I think of the Great Lakes perspective and some conversations I've heard with the International Joint Commission is climate change is really showing us that the lake levels are changing, that we have, with those lake levels changing throughout the Great Lakes, we're really seeing an increased frequency of flooding events. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of folks were familiar with that along the St. Lawrence River the past few years. And so we're really trying to think through how could potentially decommissioning dams help us to address some of the issues around lake levels and flooding that's occurring in communities throughout the Great Lakes.
Yeah, exactly. That's why we also have, like, when in our virtual reality, we have a before and during, and then what it's going to look like if we don't change, and that's including flooding of the Grand River too. And we have to prepare because climate change is real, and we have a lot of water bodies around us, like Erie or our Grand River and Boston Creek, Mackenzie Creek. All of those are water bodies that are potentially going to rise with climate change in the way that we're heading. So it's definitely something that we need to pay attention to. Yeah.
What I hope viewers take away as well is that flooding, sea level rise, it's not necessarily a bad thing unless you aren't able to respond to it. So, when I mentioned earlier about how we've already dealt with sea level rise and sea level changes, shore changes in our part of the world and eastern Long Island, we were able to deal with it because we were able to move freely. We didn't have the confines of the colonial system, the property law system, the reservation reserve system, confining our movement and our ability to adapt. And I think that that's what the climate crisis is showing the world, is that borders are very fallible, and we need to re-examine the way in which we understand borders and nationality and sovereignty to be able to respond to the changes that we're seeing in our environment. We're very arrogant and a bit ignorant to think that the planet can't survive but for us doing something. I think the planet will survive. The question is whether or not we're going to survive. Mother Earth is really smart and savvy, but it's whether or not we have the capability to change our behaviors to allow for, future generations of humans to exist.
Yeah, thank you so much for pointing that out, and I think that will lead smoothly into our coming weeks of Land Back.
It's all connected. It's all connected.
Yes, exactly. So did you have any final thoughts or final messages you want to share with us?
Yeah, I think just one, and I will just show this I'll reshare my screen so you guys can just see this last thought that I have for you. And I think the theme for this week was environmental justice. Justice is connected in a lot of ways. You're hearing environmental justice, which sort of comes out of the environmental movement of the 1970s in the United States. You're hearing new calls for things like ocean justice, climate justice, and it's all connected, and they've emerged and evolved in different ways because of historical events related to environmental action. But the one thing around water justice, that's sort of where a lot of my research focuses and what I hope folks will take away from tonight's discussion and conversation. In Western frameworks, and I think this goes back to the audience member question about what's the challenges with dealing with Western law. In Western frameworks, striving for water justice, right now we don't really have it around the world with 2 billion people living in countries that are facing, high degrees of water stress right now. But if we're striving for water justice, the Western world is like, okay, how do we promote fairness, equity, and participation in the protection of water globally? So I think from an indigenous perspective, they're missing one key tenet, or maybe a few others, but one that I like to say, which is about relationality. Like, how is water justice protecting our responsibilities that we have to our non-human relations, and particularly to water? And I think if, viewers can leave tonight and ask themselves, when I'm advocating for water justice, environmental justice, climate justice, how am I advocating for relationality? How am I advocating for kinship? How am I advocating for, restorative justice that considers how my actions are going to impact ecosystems and non-human relations, not just myself. And I think that comes down to like the big breakdown in our society is, you know, we can talk about colonialism and white supremacy and racial injustice, but at the core of all of that is some idea of human superiority, right? We have this leaning in to human supremacy when there are other beings on this planet that are just as equal and deserving as we are to exist, flourish, and naturally evolve.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Kelsey. We're so lucky to have you and Renee and Trenton on our talk, and I think this episode, even though it went a little bit long, that I think it was brilliant, and I think that we're so lucky as a show to have these minds come on here and are able to share our work with the viewers. Did you have any questions, Trenton? Any final words, or Renee? No, you're good? Okay, thank you so much, guys. I think this is a really awesome show, and thank you for all of your work that you do. And we can definitely work together, hopefully, in the future. I think we're going to cross paths, since we're like all connected. You're welcome, though.
It's such an honor, as always.
No problem. Okay, so now I said we're going to go. I think that we're going to
talk about the TikTok contest.
Okay, yep. We're going to talk about the TikTok contest that is due, and it's an important platform and medium for change. Recently, a TikTok went viral that a man named Nathan Kodak riding his longboard down the highway while drinking ocean spray, cranberry juice, and listening to Dreams by Fleetwood Mac. Let's check his video out.
And we're back to you.
Thank you. That was Nathan Kodiak. He's living in an RV without running water. Before his video went viral, Ocean Spray recently bought him a new truck, and Fleetwood Mac saw Dreams hit #1 on the charts because of TikTok. So keep in mind that he also is running without clean drinking water, and we also think that TikTok is a credible medium of change when it comes to climate change and water. We have an exciting TikTok contest launching, and create and send an original TikTok about your water experience here in Six Nations or any other reserve is open to everybody. And you can talk about water, climate change, or the land, and you can win cash prizes. Full details are on the poster and will be posted on our social media. So please send it to Facebook, your TikTok video.
Or Instagram DM, or our email if you don't have any of the other platforms.
Go and Trenton.
Yeah, okay. So now we're going to play Heavy Runner.
So we went to all the powwows when we were young. At that time, children could not dance. Only people over 50 years of age could dance. Most people do not know this, that the government forbid children to dance Indian. And that was so they could wipe out the culture of the young people, and then finally the new generation would never know what happened,
My relation, let go of your fears, for now is the time to take courage. My relation, look, for this is a beautiful life. Beauty is everywhere. You are here today, my relation, and nothing is more beautiful than that.
And our people working behind the scenes like Hannah and Catherine and Alex and Summer and all of the team and Dr. Dawn. Thank you so much for putting together a wonderful show for our viewers. And thank you for our guests again. They were amazing. So please don't forget to follow us on social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel in order to stay updated on our new show and our project. Don't forget to stay up to date on our TikTok contest, and to enter, make sure you follow us on Facebook for more details about that. Oh no.